Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: supervisor makes crew member stay on past his relief date. Crew member stays but just doesn't work. The second story: regional manager tried to threaten my hours for staying late. Realized that I held my shift together. The third story: supervisor won't compromise on scheduling, lies about her own schedule, and ends up having to work 8 hours of overtime. On to the first story. Won't let me go home? Okay, can't make me work. The shipping company I used to work for would do crew changes in the US. The ships were on liner route and would eventually make it back to the United States, where crew members would swap out. However, I then got a new job where the ships weren't on liner service, so usually your relief would be flown out to whatever country you were in. It usually ended up being a nightmare with schedule changes, messed up flights, etc. One colleague was severely overdue. The company sent a relief out to take his place, so he could get sent home. The company also had a policy that vacancies needed to be filled before overdue reliefs. However, they were waiving this for the engineer in question and sending him a relief first, then filling the vacancy later. The relief gets there and the guy does turnover, teaches him all the specifics, etc. The offgoing engineer asks, "Okay, when's my flight?" The chief engineer tells him, "Oh, sorry, actually we're not letting you go. We need to wait for the company to send a second relief, because I used that guy to fill your vacancy. You need to stay here." Needless to say, the third engineer was peeved. I think he had already scheduled a vacation with his family, like Disneyland or something. Anyway, the ship got underway to sea and he was still there. Around 10 a.m. one day, I went to the officer's lounge to get a cup of coffee and chill for a few minutes. I saw that guy sitting in the lounge in his pajamas watching the news. And the next day and the next day. Instead of working, he decided to just watch TV and nap all day. He said, "Yeah, my relief is here. As far as I'm concerned, my job is complete. They cannot get me a flight, but they can't make me work." After a few days of this, the chief engineer actually tried to give the third engineer a disciplinary. He called him into his office and berated him. The next day, the company called the chief engineer in the middle of the night, daytime in America, and basically said, "What the F are you doing? Let him go now." The disciplinary didn't go through. He got flown off in the next port, and he continued to draw overdue relief pay and salary those days he was not working. Edit. Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention that third assistant engineer was already overdue for relief. I think he was already 2 months over when this occurred, and this was pre-COVID, before the pandemic began, so he was already supposed to be home. Then he got a name and he was told when your relief shows up, you're being flown back to your home of record. He told his wife and family that he was coming home. But then the Ching pulled the rug out from under him at the last minute. Edit 2. Side story. On the same ship, some other crazy SH happened after the pandemic. This SU on my ship, steward's utility man, was overdue. His relief showed up to the ship. The relief could barely walk. He needed a hip replacement, I guess, but decided to come out anyway. At the time, you couldn't get a flight out from Singapore, so the offgoing SU just stayed on and decided to keep working. 30 days went by, and then 2 weeks after that, he stopped getting a paycheck. The offgoing SU checked why he wasn't getting a paycheck, and get this, he had exhausted his leave. He called the company, and they told him, "You're at home. You went home over 6 weeks ago." They had marked him as on vacation from his original relief date, despite the fact that he was there and working overtime the whole time. The company was charging him vacation days. Then when those were all spent, stopped paying him and told him he was AWOL. Anyway, the reason why I brought up the guy before who was on crutches, basically, and had hip problems, within 2 weeks, that guy basically could no longer walk. We had an abandoned ship/lifeboat drill, and the guy was blocking the whole crew from going up the ladder, stairs to the lifeboats. He was expected to be able to don a firefighter ensemble. Anyways, so he had to be medically repatriated to the US. Company policy is anyone in that sort of condition requires a medical escort to help bring them home. Guess who got to be the escort? The guy he relieved. Offgoing SU. Edit 3. Oh yeah, another thing that's funny is that the lounge is right down the hallway, from the chief engineer's office. So he was sitting back, feet kicked up, only feet away from where the chief was working. If the chief, captain, or anyone else went to get coffee from the lounge, they had to see him sitting there. So it was very much an in-your-face or power move on the third's part, and it was quite the object of gossip and jokes around the ship. I used to also grab ice from there before going to the gym, and I would get a chuckle every time if he was in there for those days. I hope the SU got their vacation back and paid for all that extra time. I really hope so, because it shouldn't be that way. What they're doing to all sailors is criminal. As someone who once worked with people who had just finished their jobs, I can't imagine the stress it would cause me if I made my employees keep working for X more weeks. Your story reminded me of that. The Army man's release date is coming up. My friend. He says, "Sir, I need my release papers." Sure, you'll get them. A day, 2 days, 3 days. The necessary documents, but there aren't any. The guy is still there. He can't leave without the papers, but he has to go. He finds a loft, sets up a bunk and other necessities, sleeps there, goes down to the mess hall to eat, that sort of thing. After a few weeks, he's completely bearded. My friend walks into the mess hall and the former commander sees him. "Is that you? Why are you still here?" Friend, "I still don't have any discharge papers, sir." Hell, how quickly he got his papers and a nice check for a large amount owed. The next story is, the clock decides when you clock out. So I work a night shift at a Burger King that runs pretty well together. We all know our stations well and run smoothly. Unfortunately, we have a staffing problem. It means I have to stay late to take orders for drive-thru pretty regularly. I personally have no problem with it. More hours means more money. Our shift manager asks me to do it, so they obviously don't mind, and our general manager understands we're short-staffed. Our regional manager, on the other hand, had a big one. The regional, who I'll call R from now on, came in for the usual checkup he does every month, and noticed I was regularly staying an hour or more late. R, "Have angst will travel? Why are you staying so late?" Me, "We're short-staffed at the moment, sir. It's necessary." R now looking a little peeved. "From now on, you go home on time. The clock decides when you clock out, understood?" I nod and kowtow like a good corporate drone, and that's that for a while. Fast forward another month. We got a few new hires, but I still have to stay late, and on top of that, I'm training 2 of them. R comes back and sees that I'm still staying late. R condescending, "How hard is it to understand you cannot stay late anymore?" Me, "Sir, I have to. Our staffing is too thin." R, "I don't care. It's general manager's problem. If she can't schedule hours properly, that's on her. If I see you stay late again, your hours will be cut." Now there's 2 things I disliked about this interaction. 1, he talked down to me and essentially called my manager incompetent. I understand he's a superior, but I believe a leader should treat their members with respect. 2, he threatened my livelihood. So I decided to follow his orders. For the next month, I clocked out at exactly when the clock changed and my time was up. During rushes or slow days, I never came in early or late, and the same with my leaving. My time always ended in 2 zeros. I felt bad for my coworkers, but they understood. Come next check-in, R calls in my general manager and asks why our orders take so long. Burger King times how long it takes for the drive-thru to get a car out. She tells me later that she explained our staffing problem and that no one is around who can confidently cover drive after I'm gone. And since I leave and clock in on the dot, I sometimes leave them in chaos. 2 minutes later, I'm called in and told I can stay late again. Edit. A lot of people are criticizing my GM for not fixing anything, but it's really not her fault. Our location is right where it's too residential to get transfers from other stores, and also too close to business for a lot of locals to apply. The 3 people we got that month were a miracle, and working in fast food means a lot of our employees quit when school starts back up. The GM can't control people not applying. Also, I normally work 8-hour shifts, and in the state I reside in, even a minute after 8 hours, overtime kicks in, so I'm not working with no extra pay. Thirdly, I recently learned the RM had never been in general management, and he had been hired as a regional straight out. Do with that what you will. Edit 2. Why couldn't your manager just schedule you later? Burger King, my branch at least, gives general managers a set amount of hours they can schedule an employee for each day. The scheduling program they use won't allow them to go over. Honestly, day shift has their own set of problems I'm not privy to, but I worked with them a few times, and we don't operate as smoothly. I've been night shift over a year, and most of my crew is at least 2 months in now. We know each other enough to handle our SH, and it would take some time to get that amount of understanding from a new shift. I had a story like that when I worked in sales. I worked a lot more than I should have, and one day the boss came over to do a background check. He asked me why I was working so long. I explained that we were understaffed, so I was covering those shifts. He got mad, says he wasn't going to pay overtime and that I should go home. I complied. A week later, sales dropped in the store. The employees couldn't handle the new merchandise and it was chaos. The boss called me on my day off and asked me to go to work. At first I refused and reminded him of the words he said to me. But after another call from the boss, I agreed to go to work, as long as I got overtime and bonuses. The boss had no choice and agreed. Haha, I used to do all this without extra money. It's sad that overworked employees tend to have problems. If an employee does more, especially when you need them to, they deserve to be rewarded. When managers make it clear that they don't care, you don't care. The last story is, you want me to work another shift? Sure, except for one thing. This was in a healthcare field, and someone had to be at the job at all times. As you might imagine, as you don't want to leave patients alone. The rule was that if someone called in sick or couldn't do a shift, and nobody else was able to cover the shift, that one of the supervisors would have to cover for them. They would have to. This one supervisor, Clara, kinda rubbed me and a lot of the other employees the wrong way. She wasn't awful, but seemed not quite genuine. I was willing to work a little extra now and then, but I hated 16-hour days, especially when you only had an 8-hour window to drive home, eat, shower, sleep, get up, and then drive back to work again. That's just inhuman. I'd do double shifts if I got off the next day, but hated doing it when I had to work the next day. So, one evening, I worked second shift. Clara, the supervisor, called me at work to say that the person scheduled after me couldn't make it, and would I work an extra 8 hours? A total of 16 hours. And of course, I would have to be back at work the next day. Clara knew that she couldn't make me do this, and she also made it clear that if I didn't work the extra 8 hours, she would have to come in to cover the shift for me. So basically, I went to work at 3 p.m. and was supposed to get off at 11 p.m., but she wanted me to stay at work until 7 a.m. the next morning, then return back to work at 3 p.m. that same day. I hemmed and hawed. She was really trying to make me feel guilty for not wanting to do the extra 8 hours. I asked if I could come into work an hour later the next day, at 4 p.m. instead of 3 p.m., so I could get a little extra sleep, but Clara said no. I don't really know why. I finally had an idea. It wasn't malicious exactly, but I had this inner feeling about her not being entirely on the level with me. I asked her, "You typically have to get up very early in the morning, right?" And she responded a little too eagerly, "Oh yes, very early." I think she thought I was feeling sorry for her and her grueling early morning schedule. And poor her, she has to work this overnight shift too. "Oh," I replied, "then I have an idea. Why don't I work an extra 7 hours, until 6 a.m. instead of 7 a.m.? And since you get up early anyway, you can come in and relieve me then. That additional hour in the morning will give me some extra time to sleep before I have to rush back to work. That way all you have to do is get up a little earlier than you usually do, instead of covering for a full shift." I could hear her pause, and with a tone of barely disguised disgust, she said, "Never mind, I'll just come in tonight at 11. I found out later that she never gets up early, and she was just lying about being such an early bird. Oh well, sucks to be you, Clara. I tried to work with you, but no. I'm so glad I left that job a long time ago. I would go crazy if I had to work that hard. I work in a hospital and have the same shifts. When someone can't cover, we make one person stay an extra 4 hours late, and the other person come in early for 4 hours of overtime before their shift. 2 people working 12-hour shifts is really more enjoyable than someone working 16-hour shifts. 16 hours sucks. Your brain just turns to mush after a while. It's not safe for patients. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button and support the channel.